At the start of the game, ward the bot lane bush in the middle if you're strong in 2v2. Bring red trinket and clear the enemy ward if you have a good engager. Plan your laning phase according to your jungler's pathing. Make sure to have deep vision if you plan on sieging. When you get kills on lane, before you touch the wave, think if you need to. Ping the enemy support's roams. Use pink wards for the mid lane bushes so you don't get caught. When getting the Baron buff, recall immediately and go to a side lane with most of your teammates. I'm sure you noticed that since the beginning of the season, on bot lane, warding the middle lane bush ASAP is the meta. Let me tell you when to do it, how to do it, and how to punish the enemy for doing it in situations where they shouldn't. It all comes down to how strong your 2v2 is, and how easily you can force said 2v2. At the beginning of the game, you have a bit of a window before the minions arrive. If you have a hook support who is very strong at level 1, and the enemy has an enchanter for example, and they ward this bush, they're basically inting. This is because your side can start with a red trinket, and you get to clear the ward for free. If they contest it, you will get a free hook, and the lane is basically over. If they don't contest, you get to pressure them by walking in and out of the bush for less hitting and poking, thus negating their rage advantage. In case your hook support doesn't realize this fact, I advise you to start with the red trinket and change it back to the yellow one after your first base. In case you're on the wrong side of the hooker matchup, you have two options. Either walk with your wave and give bush control, or since they expect you to do exactly that, you can approach your lane from the river right before the waves collide. In the range versus range support matchup, where the winner of the 2v2 isn't obvious, just ward the bush and call it a day. If the enemy is a mage however, rushing in to ward the bush and then looping around the tri-bush gives the enemy a false sense of security which you can exploit by waiting for them to show up and all-inning them from behind with your keystone rune and combat summoner advantage. This section may not completely cover all scenarios, but I hope I gave you a general idea on how you can take advantage of the enemy's lack of knowledge and autopiloting. Before even the laning phase starts, check if your jungler is pathing to you or away from you and plan accordingly. I'm still guilty myself of not doing this one consistently. If your jungler is pathing to you, then regardless of small details like whether you can get priority on lane or not, they will expect you to be at the bot crab and fight for it with your life on the line. Since you know this to be true, you want to plan the laning phase accordingly. The best case scenario is when you have push, because you don't have to make a decision of whether you CS or help your team, while at the same time you're putting your lane opponent into a difficult situation. This is true for all dragon fights as well. Conversely, if your jungler is pathing away from you, then you should play the laning phase safely. This is because unless you have information of the enemy jungler's starting position, in the worst case scenario, unless you're sitting under your tower with full HP and both summoners, you're at risk of getting killed by the enemy team's gank. Now, playing the laning phase safely doesn't necessarily mean that you should give up all control. For example, depending on the lane matchup, you might be able to get push and even level 2 advantage. If that happens, ideally you want to crash the second or third wave and then sit back and wait for the wave to come to you. Make sure that you have enough HP and mana so you can be dove. If you needed to spend lots of your resources to get the push, after crashing the wave make sure to take a recall. By doing this, worst case scenario you neutralize the weak side, and best case scenario your jungler gets a kill on top or mid while the enemy doesn't. This is likely to have a significant impact on the game's overall outcome. Once the early game is over, the same theory applies for drakes rather than for crabs. And by this I mean recall 30 to 40 seconds before the drake spawns to be in optimal condition to fight. Setting up a lane for taking plates and sieging usually takes multiple waves. First I want you to push a wave as quickly as you can, and while the enemy ADC is stuck under tower less hitting, I want you to escort your support to take vision in the tri-bush next to the enemy tower. We're doing this because by doing so, in the worst case, we're face checking a jungler and the support, since the enemy ADC is stuck less hitting under tower. If the ADC ignores the CS, it's a dead giveaway, so just play it safe, except if your jungler is also there to back you up. Then it's a perfect bait. Make sure to look out for mid laners though. I burnt myself by doing everything perfectly except for checking whether my mid laner has priority or not. So get deep vision before walking up to hitting the tower, because if you push without doing so, then crying about the jungle gap isn't actually justified. After getting kills, before touching the wave, check if you need to push or if you can recall immediately. The things to take into consideration are the following. Is the wave pushing to you or away from you? If it's pushing to you, or if it's neutral, you don't have to touch the wave. Do you need the gold you'd get from the wave to get a better buy? If no, then you don't have to touch the wave. Do you know where the enemy jungler and mid laners are? If you don't, then none of the above applies. Whether you want to do something doesn't matter if you can't. To summarize, if the wave isn't pushing away from you, usually taking a recall immediately is the best thing to do. This is because by doing so, you get back to the lane at the same time as your opponent and you can continue pressuring them, now with an advantage you gain by scoring some kills. I'm sure you've heard of roaming timers. In case you haven't, it is the window of time when the support can leave bot lane for a longer period of time, because if their ADC plays safe and sits on their tower, they barely lose any minions. This happens right after you manage to crash bot wave, and ideally after you, as an ADC, recall. The following wave is going to push back to you, and you're free to farm on their tower. Now here's what I want you to do. If you see that the enemy crashed the wave under your tower, and you see that the support is missing, danger ping around the bot side of the mid lane, and on top of your mid laner as well, to let them know that the support might be roaming. Think about what this does to a game. Your mid laner will be thankful, lane is stable. Enemy mid laner will be molding over their support being dogshit. When it's your support's time to roam, and the enemy ADC doesn't ping, the roam is successful, enemy mid laner loses their minds, blames their support, game is basically won. All because you were alert and knew what to do and when to do it. For a small Kai'Sa tip, as you can see in this example, Kai'Sa is very strong at abusing enemy ADCs post level 6. So do it to your heart's content now that you know everything you need to, in order to pull this off successfully. As ADC, one of the biggest way of influencing the game is by not dying and consistently taking farm. In the mid game, for this reason, we're moving to the mid lane because it's the shortest and thus the safest from assassins and such. The main ways of catching you off guard is from the fog of war. To further prove my point, take a look at the amount of control wards pros buy in solo queue and compare it to mine. If you've ever played support for a while, you'll understand how hard it is sometimes to establish vision control. This seemingly small action will have significant impact on both your own and your teammates' chances of successfully fulfilling your roles. Use Baron correctly. After taking Baron down, you should usually take a recall immediately, ideally along with your teammates to be in the same tempo. The Baron buff's strength depends on how you use it. To maximize its value, you want to take down as much of the enemy's base as possible. Doing so advances the game and gives you lots of standing gold by taking towers. Recently, I was pondering this question of what is the best thing to do with Baron, and I went over quite a few Korean pro ADC games with the sole intent of seeing what they do after they get it. In approximately 75% of the cases, they immediately recalled and usually went to one of the side lanes. In rare cases, when the mid lane had a wave approaching, they took it and then transitioned to the side lane. It's important to siege with your team because number disadvantages aren't going to be offset by the buff Baron gives. As an ADC, side lanes are also easier to siege than mid lane because the edge of the map protects you from one of the directions, while in mid lane you're exposed from all around you. Now earlier I mentioned that you should usually recall immediately after taking Baron. The exception is when there are big waves very close to you and you need the gold they give to get a better buy at base. Just understand that you're delaying the siege, which could have unforeseen negative implications, like your teammates getting caught because you arrived too late. I hope you've learned a lot from my video. If you're interested in learning a lot more, then I urge you to join my Discord server and hit me up for coaching, for which you can find the invite in the description below. Other than that, if you have any questions, then I hope to see you on my Twitch streams. Peace. Caught in a badger, man.